Good evening. An Odd Boy, Volume 1, Chapter 2, Part 3. Mr. Love loaned me some records on one occasion, Robert Johnson and Bessie Smith. I thought she was fantastic and wondered if my mother would be able to sing like that. My mother let me play it on the record player. I asked her if she could sing along with Bessie Smith, but my mother said that she couldn't understand the words. "Is she singing in English, Victor?" "Of course she's singing in English, Mum," I replied, and gave her my rendition. "A Ford is a car everybody wanna ride. Jump on and you will see. I got a Ford engine movements in my hips, is son of my guarantee." My mother was amused to oblige me with singing with Bessie Smith number, as my father was off at the top of the garden digging the rubber bean pitch. My mother never did quite follow black American dialect, but I crossed that linguistic divide with relative ease. My mother made a valiant attempt when I translated Bessie Smith into a form of English she could comprehend. Unfortunately, my father heard it from the garden and stomped into the house to tell me I was not to listen to that depraved row again. I did not know what the word depraved meant, but it did not seem an appropriate time to ask. I was told to take the record back. "You are never to bring filth like that into the house again," my father shouted. My mother said she would have a word with Mrs. Love about it. I was glad of that because I didn't want my father writing one of his horrible letters to Mr. Love. When I eventually found out what depraved meant, I was entirely confused. Mr. Love had a remarkable collection of blues. I heard most of it over the times I went to visit him, but these times were unpredictable. There were the times when he had his turns and the times when I was at school. There were times when we were away and times when he wasn't at home. One time I remember quite vividly was when he told me about the genii called algebra. Algebra would come to a particular crossroads to meet you if you wanted to be the best guitar player or most superb musician of any kind you could ever hope to be. It had to be a deserted crossroads out in the country, and you had to go at midnight. "Is it like Aladdin and the genie in the lamp?" I asked. Mr. Love told me that was a good way to look at the story. Mr. Love told me that Robert Johnson had been to the crossroads, somewhere way down in the Mississippi Delta, and this algebra fellow showed up and tuned his guitar. After that, Robert Johnson could play the guitar better than anyone alive. I asked Mr. Love if that really happened. He replied mysteriously, "Well, no one knows, and no one ever can know unless it happens to them. The world is a mysterious place, even though some people do not want it to be. That is why poets write poetry. There are some things that cannot be explained in ordinary words." Then he played me some Robert Johnson, and the sound of that slide guitar sent shivers up and down my spine. After I heard Robert Johnson on slide guitar, I was convinced there really was a genie called algebra, and I determined I was going to meet him one day when I had a guitar. "Does the crossroads have to be in Mississippi?" I asked. Mr. Love didn't know. "I suppose," he ventured, "that it could be any country crossroads. But maybe it's more a question of being the right person than it being the right crossroads." I pondered for a moment and asked, "Do you think I'm the right kind of person? I want to play guitar like Robert Johnson and sing like Big Bill Broonzy." Mr. Love smiled and said, "That is certainly a marvellous aspiration. With an aspiration like that, I would say that you are just the right kind of person. Maybe you will get a guitar for your birthday or Christmas, and then, if you practice, who knows what you may accomplish." I still wanted to know about this algebra genie, though, because he sounded like a good insurance against possible shortcomings. I was sure I'd have those aplenty. "I would think," Mr. Love considered, "that the genie is mainly your enthusiasm, young Victor. Anyone with true enthusiasm always tries harder and works longer than others. Let your enthusiasm be your genie, Victor, and that will take you wherever you wish to travel." Well, I was going to work hard at it. That was without a doubt. But I was also going to try to meet the algebra fellow one way or another. Robert Johnson sounded like an entire orchestra on his guitar, and that sounded like a great deal of hard work. Algebra's help would certainly speed things along. It took me years to find out the real name, because no one knew what I was talking about. Algebra was mathematics, and allegro meant fast in Italian, so they obviously weren't the right names. I wished I'd written the name down, but that wouldn't have helped me either, because no one wanted to know about African genies anyhow. Mr. Love was a fine old gentleman, and I was entirely at ease around him. On the occasions when he became mentally lost, he didn't worry me, but I did keep away. I'd always call hello to him, and that seemed to work because he never said anything strange to me, as he supposedly did to others. Sometimes I saw Mrs. Love at the bus stop. One such time she said, "I am not wearing my coat inside out." I didn't think she was. She explained that they wore them with the furry side inside in the Himalayas. That is where the coat came from. She may even have said it came from Tibet, but I couldn't vouch for it after all these years. It came from somewhere east of Clacton-on-Sea, and that was for sure. Her father had been there, and she'd been there with him along with her brother. She didn't mention a mother. Her father had some sort of diplomatic job. They travelled a lot. I knew about Tibet because there were 2 books at West Street Junior School by 2 Czechoslovakian explorers, Vladimir Sis and Josef Vanis. One was an art book full of paintings and sculptures, and the other was called On the Road Through Tibet. One had pictures of a beautiful flaming devil lady. She was dancing. She looked the very thing for me. I had no idea where to find it, though, and it was all many thousands of miles away on the roof of the world. I'd read what I could about Tibet. I wanted to go there, But how could a person get there? Somehow I had gained the impression that it was too far away and that there was a war going on there, with Chinese soldiers invading and burning everything, probably under orders from God or something. It sounded terrible, and I got the feeling that everything I'd seen in the books was gone. I'd been told that things like that existed in other countries, but what I saw of it in pictures was not like the pictures of Tibet. There were no naked flaming ladies, just bland statues with expressionlessly serene faces. They were hot countries too, and I didn't like the heat. That's what was so splendid about Scandinavia, where the Norsemen lived. It seemed always cold there. Tibet seemed like that to me. I loved Viking history, and I loved the costumes. I'd seen a replica of the costume that was worn by Harald Hardrada. Fantastic fur leggings bound on with leather straps. I thought that was brilliant. I wanted a horned helmet and a double-headed battle axe. The paintings from Tibet looked as if Vikings had painted them. There were scenes that looked like Valhalla or something, with all kinds of excitement going on. I had a wild imagination when it came to concepts of the world. I knew that the religion of the Norsemen had been lost. I thought I might find something like it in Tibet, but Tibet had been invaded by mousy tongue. So maybe I'd have to look elsewhere, or maybe when I was an adult I'd try to find that place. Maybe I'd find Alice again and we'd go there together. I couldn't work out why Mrs. Love had told me that about her coat. I thought about it for days, and it occurred to me later that she might have been trying to assure me that she wasn't shell-shocked like her brother. Her coat was the right way round. That was all I needed to know, but then I hadn't thought it was inside out in the first place. I was happy for people to wear whatever kind of coat they wanted, and whatever way round. I desperately wanted the leather coat that my mother kept in the attic. It belonged to her brother Bernd Schubert, who was for a time a dispatch rider in the German army. It was extremely long and dark green. It had all kinds of straps and buckles, but it was too big for me. My mother threw it out at some point when I started being beaten up at school for having a German mother. I never told her about the bullying, but she got to hear about it anyway and threw the coat out because she thought it would get me into even more trouble. One day I asked Mrs. Love if it was all right to call by and hear some of her brother's music, but she told me it wasn't a good time. I never saw her again. She died not long after that, and Mr. Love went downhill fast. Maybe it took a year, but after she died, I saw him rarely. He had more frequent turns of strangeness. But me, I expected it to happen. I knew he'd lost control when he built a fire on Main Street and shot it full of holes. Bob Dylan stuck inside of Mobile. Well, no, he didn't do that. I have no idea what happened. Suddenly, number 5 Woodsfield Lane was for sale, and nobody was about to tell me anything. Where has Mr. Love gone? My father looked stern. It's none of our concern. I persisted nonetheless. Has Mr. Love died? That is not for you to know, my father barked. Later I asked my mother, Has Mr. Love died? My mother looked deeply sad. He has gone away to a place where they will look after him. He can no longer live on his own. Could I visit him? No, I couldn't. Why? He does not live in the sort of place where they allow children to go, my mother explained. Doctors were keen on committing people at that time. It seems extremely sad now to think that I could have visited him. I would have visited him. I know that, and that's probably why no one was willing to tell me anything, including my mother. I'd visited him to listen to that depraved row a few times too often for my father's liking.